Teacup, Tempest by Wigram. Having a baby was excruciating, Naruto found out, panting in pain and fear, laying on her bed with her legs spread and her hands clenched in her sheets. It was probably only made worse by the fact that she was too young and too small to be having a baby, and that she was having her baby by herself without a midwife. And she was missing her graduation exam! Stupid baby couldn't wait a few days or have come earlier. No, it had to be born today. That part really galled her. But she knew that she wouldn't be able to hold her Tatsumaki jutsu while pushing a baby out, so she was doing it herself. She was used to doing things without help anyway. Another labor pain came, and Naruto threw back her head and screamed. Thankfully, knowing that the soundproofing jutsu on her apartment would hold, she tested it before, and it had held up to 74 hours of intense noise, even while she'd stabbed herself in the hand, testing its integrity when she was in pain. When the labor pain waned, she fervently swore that she would never have another baby. One was more than enough. And she was glad that she'd been able to hunt down and kill that manipulative menace who had gotten her trust and then raped her. He certainly hadn't expected her to get up off the ground a minute after leaving her in the alley and follow him into the red light district and proceed to stab him in the kidneys, cut off everything else, then stab him in the neck, letting him bleed to death while she watched with fire in her eyes, still bleeding from the assault. It had been a heady experience to kill, but the sense of vengeance that she'd experienced while doing so had soothed her wounded soul a lot. Thinking back to what several of the pregnancy books had said about having a baby at home, she hauled herself to her feet and shuffled around her bedroom, a hand pressed lightly to her belly and another to her back. She didn't know how dilated she was, since she refused to look at herself in a mirror, but she knew that it was close. She'd already been in labor for 8 hours. If it went on for very much longer, she'd soon take a kunai to her belly and cut the baby out. It'd be okay, she'd heal. She didn't know how she could heal like she could, but she now suspected that it had something to do with the great honking black seal tattoo that was flashing with red chakra around her belly button, which incidentally was now an outie instead of an innie. She'd only mildly freaked out when she'd woken up one morning to find that her belly button had popped out. She just hoped that once the baby was out, her belly button would go back to normal. Another cramp started, and she hurried as fast as she could over to the collection of blankets that she'd set up sort of like a nest. She wasn't very tall, so the baby wouldn't fall very far, and when she crouched, the baby's head ought to reach the soft nest of blankets before it was entirely out of her. She'd read the books and knew that it was best to either be sitting in a pool of water or standing when giving birth at home. Since she didn't have anyone to help her in the bathtub, there was really only one option left. Let gravity do its thing. Her hands clenched tight into fists, and she pounded the wall in pain, screaming as it felt like she was being torn open. The pain continued, and she kept screaming, and then suddenly, she wasn't the only one screaming. A thin, soft cry came from the nest below her, and she barely managed to move to the side before falling over, hands holding her cramping belly. She rested, breathing hard, relieved that it was over, and stared at the bloody, wiggling thing that was laying in the nest. It had really light hair from what she could see through the blood, and she reached out to the baby, wiping away the blood and gunk from its eyes. And its eyes were sky blue. Recovering faster than she'd ever read about, Naruto pulled a towel and the bucket of now lukewarm water to her, and carefully picked the slippery baby up, putting it in her lap and cleaning it as gently as she could. It was a boy, she quickly found. She had a son.